Welcome to the Simply Authentic podcast, where we hope to inspire you to dream bigger, empower you to take charge of your own life, and challenge you to be your most authentic self.
Welcome back to the Simply Authentic podcast. I'm Tanya Murfin.
And I'm Angie Mullings. And today we are talking about another pillar of peak performance and leadership, and that is collaboration and big picture thinking.
Yeah. And I think that any organization, and really doesn't matter what job you're in, to be collaborating with others on the most minuscule tasks or the biggest projects is the best way to achieve optimum performance.
Yes.
And we would probably have a lot of leaders and CEOs agree with us on that, but we both come from an experience that we have shared with not only our brokerages, but our leadership roles at the Board of Realtors, and we have some examples to give on that as we get later on.
Yeah.
That we've collaborated.
And for those of you watching on YouTube, I have props today. But I have John Maxwell's book with me, and you'll probably hear me quote a few things from John Maxwell's book because, he gives specific examples of past leaders, Abe Lincoln, Winston Churchill, Ron Reagan, that understood the value of having different perspectives in the room. So if you let's say that you're selecting a group of board members or a group of people for what you're going to do.
Yes.
If you just pick your friends and how are you ever going to have different perspectives? Because if you pick your friends, most of them are going to agree or have the same line of thinking for the most part that you do. But Abe Lincoln put people on his cabinet who were opposed to him during the election. Winston Churchill talked about the need for variety and having your opponents around the table. And then Ron Reagan took Tip O'Neill to lunch. They went to have lunch once a week. And Tip O'Neill was on the other side of the aisle from him, but he needed to know these are people who put people first. And that's the big part of John Maxwell's latest book, is that leadership is about others. It's about putting other people first. And if your goal is whatever your goal is, whatever you need to achieve, if you just have your line of thinking, a good idea stays a good idea. Right. But if you collaborate, a good idea becomes a great idea.
Right. Agree with you. So the definition of collaboration facilitates the exchange of ideas and thoughts among team members who then weigh in on them with collective expertise. So one of the articles that I was reading on this topic, Angie, was talking about each of those people's part in a collaborative effort. So let's say you have a project and you bring 10 or 15, 20 team members together. Everybody's going to have their own opinions. But rather than giving it to two people to figure out, or even worse, one, you bring in a team of people. And what's going to happen when you do that is the different strengths at the table in certain individuals is going to shine. So if you have somebody that's strong in techie or IT portion of it, and they say, well, what if we did this? Then you kind of give that wing of it to them. And I think when you sit at that table with that many people and you start to decipher what the goal is, and you see whose strengths and qualities are coming out in their ideas, you quickly figure out who's got what strengths, and you delegate those tasks to them. And, imagine that same project with 2 people on it versus 15, then you're going to have a completely different result in the end, because you're going to have a lot less ideas coming to the table. Now, you and I have experienced different moments like that where maybe there's too many people at the table,
Right.
and there's too many opinions at the table. And I think in a good work setting, you're obviously going to, someone who's leading the meeting is going to be able to take charge and squash any chitter chatter that shouldn't be going on,
You would hope.
and maybe even divide a few people into subgroups of whoever seems to be strong in this category of the project. Then let's put them together and break it out. So there's different ways of going about this, but I think our overall point of covering this subject is to encourage what strength there is in collaboration.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and why you want to do it. Like I said, different perspectives, different points of view will aid in making that project a good project or a great project. And, I guess some reasons why it's important, obviously you've kind of covered a couple of them, but it encourages problem solving, which is not everybody's forte.
No.
Some people just don't have, or they need to be guided.
Right.
They need to have someone else paired with them who is not afraid to jump out and give at least some directions. Jump out and say, give some thought on how to solve a problem. And it's probably not going to end up as that, but you've got to have somebody who's willing to speak up first.
Sure.
And then maybe pair them with some other people who maybe aren't as likely to take the helm on that. But we learn from each other. We learn different things. We have different life experiences. And whether it's a board or an organization or within your own unit at work or whatever it is, we all have different experiences and we can learn from each other.
It also would increase productivity and the potential for change. So if you think about that, if you give a task to a couple of people and they just are those people who can't get out of their own way of thinking of how do we solve this problem, versus you give it to a larger group of people with different perspectives, then probably the potential for change is greater. Right? Because you're going to have different perspectives.
Right. And we did just do an episode a couple of weeks ago about change
We
and
did.
how important it is that we can't stay stagnant. We cannot do things. I don't know about you, but one of the worst things I can be told is, well, we've always done it that way. I don't want to hear that.
Right. Agreed.
I don't want to do that. I don't want to hear it. I want different ideas, new ideas. And if we have to change or adapt to get there, then all the better will be.
And often, I think when we hear that, well, we've always done it that way, I think there is oftentimes a stalemate going on, right?
Yeah.
Or there's a large issue going on. When someone has to say those words, then
Yeah.
probably the other side of that is someone's challenging.
Right.
Why are we doing it this way? It seems that is either, should be retired, that idea should be retired. That was back in the 2000 era when those ideas were laid out and people were, managing things like that. It could be an antiquated idea.
Exactly.
Yes, so
Yeah.
that's what comes to my mind. I think also collaboration creates a stronger sense of community, and many times profitability will go up.
Right.
Because you have more people buying into their coworkers,
Right.
their purpose,
Yes.
wanting to be a part of a big task, right? You have a big project, and a lot of people being involved in that gives ownership,
Right.
and a sense of pride to people.
Absolutely.
To-
Absolutely.
yeah.
Then it's not just your idea, it's our idea.
Exactly.
And again, when we're talking about leadership, we want to really emphasize that we've got to get rid of the I and the mine and the possessiveness
Yeah.
that sometimes comes with that. If it is a collaborative effort, then yes, everyone has ownership and
Right.
everyone can be proud of whatever that great idea happens to be or that great project happens to be because they all had some input.
Exactly. Another way of thinking about collaborative efforts is shared leadership, and that's just another way to term it, I think. I think it's the same team focus approach where leadership responsibilities are distributed among individuals individuals, but you're encouraged to contribute your unique skills and perspectives. And this diversity often leads to more innovation and effective problem solving.
Yeah. And you, if you are leading or if you're having a strategic planner come in and lead a particular discussion, part of that is making sure that all the voices are heard, right? So I remember sitting around the board table, and I was not the most vocal in the beginning because we both kind of like to sit back and listen, and we want to understand who everyone is, what their position is. And had I been called out at the time, and not really called out, but asked specifically for my opinion, I would have given it. But I'm also not someone who is going to repeat what has been said 15 times around the table, right? What does that accomplish? But as the leader, the head of the table, whatever your position is, whoever's leading that discussion, we sometimes do have to sort of draw it out of some people. You're going to have people that are ready, willing, and able to give their opinion right away, but then others we're going to have to ask.
Yes.
And sometimes that's what they need in order just to get the juices flowing. They need to be asked.
Yeah, agree. And they need to start feeling comfortable.
Right.
And I think in the shared leadership or the collaborative setting, you're getting to know your cohorts probably better by having a one-on-one. You go sit by them. You have this meeting maybe, once every couple of weeks or once a month, and you go sit by somebody different every time, and you're learning that they have a family, or you're learning that they just got married, or, it
Found some common ground or whatever.
exactly.
Yeah.
And it just creates some friendly atmosphere there. So one of the examples, Angie, that I'm going to take you back to, because you were involved in this as well. So it would have been probably my first full year being involved on the board of directors at the Board of Realtors. And you were also seated at the table and had already been there for several years before I got sat there. And we had a strategic planning event by Daryl Bram. And he came in that first year, and I don't know what had happened in years past. So I have a view of him being kind of the instigator of starting to have a collaborative strategic plan.
Right.
And having all the board members, 2 boards, and various committee chairs at times, and just some other people in the room. But I remember very clearly that we sat in the room and we started, and he was having trouble getting us to talk. And he was having trouble getting us to...
A bunch of realtors. Can you believe
A
that?
bunch of egotistical realtors.
So strange that we were not willing
We love to talk, but man, you get a bunch of different companies in a room and people who aren't used to collaborating together, and everybody is silent. Everybody wears their company on their vest.
Yeah.
And so I remember we got started with the day. And Daryl obviously could tell that there was something up and that the room was super icy. And we took a break and we came back, and he pretty much called us out and said, if you walked in this room with your company on your shirt, you need to drop it at the door. When you walk back in this room, you should have dropped your company at the door along with your ego, because we're not going to get anywhere if you're all wearing your company vest in here.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I, like you, was very quiet in the beginning and was trying to just feel out the different members on the board. What are these personalities? I know these names. I don't know these people. I don't know who they are. And so we spent probably 2 days, maybe 3, 2.5, with Daryl. And by the end of that day, the atmosphere had definitely changed in the room.
Right.
But then when we came back and met the next day, and he had all of our ideas that we'd come up with on the first day hanging on the walls, and then we just continued. It really taught me how stuffy and egotistical a room can be when you bring certain leaders to the same room.
Right.
If no one's been given any instruction of what they're supposed to be doing there.
Right.
And I think that it ended up being a very successful event or strategic planning event after we all realized this has nothing to do with your company.
Right.
We don't need to know who you work for. In fact, we don't care who you work for. You are here because you're a Realtor member and you have been installed as a director or an officer in this organization, and we need your ideas. That's why
Right.
you're here.
Right.
So
Right.
that is such a great moment in my past to see how important it is to drop your ego and to sit at the table with those people and let your guard down
Right.
and share your ideas. And there are no dumb questions, right?
Right.
There probably are, let's be honest. I've asked plenty in my day. But when you're sitting among peers who are respecting you because you're actually talking, I would rather be somebody asking dumb questions than someone not talking at all,
Right. Yeah.
right?
Yeah. That's really interesting. I don't think we've ever talked about that particular event between the two
I
of us.
don't think we have either.
And so it's interesting to hear your perspective because I was, 3 years ahead of you in terms of going up the chain of command. And I remember that discussion. We spent a lot of money, and that's one thing I want to emphasize. If you're thinking about having someone come in and help you facilitate a strategic planning session, it's not cheap sometimes. I mean, obviously, there are different levels, but we were at a point in our board history where we had been doing some strategic planning, but only amongst us. And sometimes what you really need is perspective from an outside viewpoint. You need a third party.
Right.
And it's worth the investment. I will tell you that we fought back and forth. We discussed it for a long time. It's going to cost us a lot of money, but we also have a responsibility to invest back into our association and the members that we serve. And that's in the end where we came down on that.
Right.
So we had, yes, an outside consultant come in and took us through the process. And yeah, that first day was a little rough because we just didn't open up that much. But by day 2 and definitely by day 3, there was a totally different energy, and I felt energized just because of the ideas that were floating around and the possibilities of what if. He kept asking the question, what if you could though? What if you? And that's what I took away from that was the ability to sort of, like you've already mentioned, some people get in their own way. They're thinking too narrow-mindedly about things and they can't see the forest for the trees. And he made us really dig into what was important. And I'll never forget a director on the board. He made us break into smaller groups like day 2 or so. And we were within those small groups supposed to come up with some ideas and answer some questions. And I was sitting with a director that I did not know well, and she wasn't being vocal. She wasn't saying anything. And this was in a smaller group. I mean, I get it when you're in a room of 25 and you're not afraid to, or you're a little timid in giving some response. But this was in a group of 3 or 4 of us, and she said that she didn't feel valued. Eventually we got there. We kept asking, what do you think? How do you feel about this? And she really wasn't giving any input. And then finally she basically said, I don't feel like my opinion is valued here in that boardroom. And we tried to figure out why she felt that way, and really, just had to talk about finding common ground.
Yeah.
We were trying to really sympathize with her and try to figure out why she was feeling that way. And she didn't run for the board again, and that's kind of disappointing because I don't know that we made enough headway. But sometimes those are the things you'll find out. When you start asking the questions, you think everybody's on the same page as you in terms of, I feel quite confident in the room. Everybody who's here should, because they were selected to serve on this board. But not everybody does. And sometimes you've got to get to the root of what's going on, because if she feels that way, there's probably other people within the organization that feel that way, that their opinion is not valued. And now we've got a bigger problem, and we've got to figure out how to solve that bigger problem of people not feeling like they're valued.
And the word that comes to my mind when you say that is culture.
Yes.
And we did a podcast earlier this year in July 24th, we launched episode 68 with Tom Douglas, and he's an owner of J-Mark.
Yes.
And one of his primary reasons he took his company from a couple hundred down to 6 people when he rebuilt it was to rebuild culture. And
Yes.
culture was his number one goal. If they don't feel valued and they don't feel like they belong here and that their voice is recognized and will be listened to, then I've done something wrong.
Right.
And all the while he, said, of course, we all have bad hires and we all have people that just never fit in.
Right.
And that's something different, really. But I think it all comes down to the culture being built first around a collaborative nature and viewpoint. And one of the other points that I took out of something I was listening to was that if the leader of whatever it is, the organization, the board that they're on, if the spokesperson or leader doesn't humble themselves to show that they are a team player and that they are willing to collaborate as well, then there won't be a buy-in from the rest of the group.
True.
And
Sure.
so that all comes back to culture as well, and what maybe the person in charge, the team leader, the boss, what setting they are going into this effort with. If it's all a you guys versus we or I, then the feeling is going to be, it's not going to be a humble room,
Right.
It's going to
Right.
be that, oh, well, this is all about him
Yeah.
and his ideas, or her and her ideas. So I
Yeah.
think culture always is in there somewhere, that word of
I
with
agree, and that was a
collaborative.
great episode. If you missed that, go back and listen to it.
Yeah.
And one thing I will say, one last thing on the whole strategic planning process is that Daryl did sit down with the president and immediate past president. There were 3 of us in the room. He wanted to get our takes on. He needed some kind of instruction, right? He
Well, sure.
needed some kind of direction. Like, what are you struggling with?
Yeah.
Where do you want to go?
Who is this place?
Who is it?
Right.
Yes. Tell us about the people around the table. What kind of input am I going to have? How, what do you want out of it? And I think that's a really great point to start with, is that as a leader, very often you need to have a clear picture of where you would like to go,
Right.
just to get the process started.
Agree.
Because you go in cold and it's going to be difficult to really move the needle.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to say on collaboration before we move into sort of this big picture thinking? Because it all works together. But,
It does. Yeah. I don't think so.
Okay. All right. So let's talk about this idea of vision and big picture thinking, because really culture, like you said, then collaboration. You have a culture, you build a culture of collaboration. So everybody feels comfortable. And the reason you do that is because you have vision. You have big picture thinking in terms of what the possibilities might be. And I believe that some of us need help with that, while others just are, maybe it's innate, or maybe you grow to that. I feel like I've grown to that as a leader of my own company. I want to tell you about an exercise I was part of a couple of weeks ago. It was a group of educators and business owners and community leaders, and we were asked to do a card sort. Have you know what that is?
No.
Okay, well, I didn't either.
Okay.
So we were each given, we broke into groups of like 4 or 5, and in the group of 4 or 5, we divided, and 2 were going to be sorters and 3 were going to be observers.
Okay.
So we were given a stack of cards, a big stack of cards that had all kinds of different things on it. You had things that had landmarks on it, nature scenes, people, AI generated kind of things that lend towards technology. So just cards of a vast variety. And there were probably, 50, 60 cards in the stack. So each group was given this stack, and I was a sorter with another individual, and when the bell dinged and it was time to go, we just shoved all these cards out on the table and we just got a look at them from a high level, right? I wanted to see everything there was available. And then the only instruction we were given was, we want you to sort these cards. So we weren't given specific instructions, sort them by color or people versus or nature versus, we weren't given any instruction. But my partner and I, that's how we ended up sorting these cards. We put things, we sorted them into two bunches, ones with people and ones without people. And then we sorted them further into just, these people are doing happy things. These people are doing fun things versus work. And then, so we just kept sorting until we came down with, this group is doing this. And so we ended up with like 6 different groups out of that. Okay. So when the time was up and we went around the room and we were each supposed to describe how we sorted, we were so different than everyone else. And it was interesting because some of them took the stack of cards and turned them over one at a time and looked at them individually and then sorted them by different patterns. And then another group wanted to tell a story. So they, again, one at a time, I think we were the only group who just threw it out on the table and looked at it from up here because I wanted to see everything.
Right.
If I looked at things with an individual card each at a time, I couldn't see the big picture.
Right. I would feel like you would be telling a story in your head, one picture at a time.
Yes.
And that would change as you went through the stack
Yes.
if they weren't in any certain order.
Yeah, it was just a very interesting exercise in terms of how we look at things. Sometimes we're very dialed in, we're very on point, and we can't see, again, same analogy, forest for the trees, because we're so focused on this one individual thing. And without a lot of instruction, which is what happens many times in our organizations and companies, there's not a playbook for what we do, right?
Right.
Nobody told us how to be brokers, how to run a company.
Right.
We kind of just went out and did it, and we kind of had an idea of how other companies were ran maybe, but no one gave us a specific handbook.
Right.
They say this about parenting all the
Yes.
time, right? There's no parenting handbook.
Yes.
So the way we look at things is so different. And again, I believe that the best leaders are people who look from up here, from a high level, so they can see all the moving parts and then figure out what direction to go in.
I agree. I think if you and I, and this might be a fun task for all of our listeners, if you sat here and came up with, certain categories of what type of personality 5 of your friends had, and the underlying question was, are they a big thinker? We could probably come up with an answer to those 5 friends of yes and why on her.
Right.
No and why on him. No on why on her.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I don't think that everybody is capable of thinking big. And I think that also goes to dreaming big.
Right.
Because you and I, probably one of the reasons that we get along is we think somewhat alike in some aspects, and we also are big thinkers and
Right.
big dreamers, and
Right.
we aren't afraid to talk about dreams
Right.
of where we want to be one day or what we want to do one day. And I think a lot of people either grow up or their life has taught them, don't dream any bigger than what you've got right now, because this is the top.
Yeah.
You are capped out right here, whatever it is, salary, relationship, family, whatever it is. So I do think that big thinking is a hard thing to grasp for some people.
I agree. And it makes me sad.
Yeah.
It makes me sad that some of this does have to do with dreaming. And, sometimes some people are raised that just keep your head down. Just do your job, keep your head down. don't get in the fray of things, don't color outside the lines. And that's where the fun is, right? You color outside the lines. When I first, and I think, and we have discussed this, but for the first 12 years of my career, I was that person. I'm going to learn how to do this job. I'm going to learn how to do it really well. I don't need to do anything else. I'm going to, get my experience in. I'm going to do this and that. And then I was introduced to the board. And then I was introduced to Missouri Realtors. And then I was introduced to the National Association of Realtors. And each level making me step it up and grow and have to learn different things and understand the big picture and how that affects me at the local level. So if you're involved in our career path anyway, if you get engaged and you get involved, then you understand that there is more that goes on outside of our four walls, right? That affects
Of course.
us.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I, too, have had the same experience and at a different level than you have. But it's so enlightening when your eyes are open to something bigger within the same organization. And that's a great example, really, that we can give. So I'm certain people will hear this and think about an example in their own lives. But I had no idea what was going on at our local board, at Missouri Realtors, at NAR, until I was exposed to it in the right manner.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, I don't know, I use this as an example, but just using Diva Wash in your laundry.
Yes. Yeah.
What you don't know, you don't know.
Right.
Right? And
Yeah.
that was introduced me in a Secret Santa exchange one Christmas, and I got it, and I was like, oh, what's this? Meant nothing to me until I started using it. And then you know.
Then you know.
Then you're in
it's
the know.
the best.
It is the best, and you have to have it
Yes.
in your laundry. So, very bizarre example there, but you often don't know what you don't know.
No. And some of this big picture thinking comes with asking questions, not being satisfied with what's right in front of you. Like not only do you have to seek out opportunity to learn, but you have to be open to learning, to listening, to asking a lot of questions. Again, I'll go back to what if. One of the best questions you can ask yourself is what if? What if we removed this barrier? What if we thought bigger? What if we colored outside the lines? What's the worst that's going to happen?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I think that, vision is something that, again, depending on how much we've been challenged in our career or the things that we're involved in, I think it comes easier for some than others. And but I don't know that just because you were brought up in a certain way that you can't learn to be a big picture thinker. I think that's one of those things you can learn,
Absolutely. Right? I just think oftentimes it is somehow getting out of what's normal for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because for those people who are just surviving, whatever it is, they're surviving their life, they're not able to visualize anything bigger because of where they are in that spot in time. But that will come and go. That will pass.
Right.
And so I just think, for me, the lesson here is a couple of things. It is collaboration and working with people to maybe have the best view of what needs to be done, the task at hand, what needs to change, is very important in the work setting, sometimes in a friendship setting, sometimes in a marriage setting, right? We're not just talking about work here.
Right.
Collaborating how you can not kill your spouse in his sleep. Together with him. Might be something you want to think about. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not married, so I'm not speaking from personal experience. But, and then big picture, it takes a certain maybe person or a certain group of people to teach you that you don't have to just stay right in your lane. We certainly don't want to encourage anything illegal or anything that you shouldn't be doing. But what we're saying is that sometimes if you step outside of those lines that you are used to following, you're used to walking, that there can be beauty in big thinking and seeing a bigger picture than the narrow picture or the narrow tunnel that you have a vision of right now.
Right. And as we start to wrap up, we'll just say that if you need some help with that, we would love to help you. That's one thing that we have been working on is the strategic planning sort of field and wanting to help with that, because we both have experience in that, and we feel like we can help you get outside your head and have a different perspective. So if you're interested in talking to us about that, we'd be happy to do that.
Absolutely. And if you listen to this episode and you really need a coworker to be more collaborative, or you need a friend to be a big thinker and to get out of their own way, share this with them. We would appreciate you sharing it with your friends and family. Follow us on social media. And we will
thank Gershman Mortgage. We're going to thank Gershman Mortgage.
Jordan over there.
And we'll see you next time, right?
Okay, see you next time, guys.
Thanks for listening to the Simply Authentic podcast. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram.
Be sure to listen to us on your favorite podcasting app.